I was talking with Nabila a while ago. I told her you are indeed very lucky because you have this session wherein you are really able to develop and enhance your research skills. Because after all, pursuing a graduate study, having these letters after your name is a very heavy responsibility. Like if you are called master of this and that, if you are called has a PhD degree on this and that, that is actually a very heavy obligation and responsibility. And with that, for most of us, it tells us that we should be a performing social scientist. So I hope you find my sharing, the insights that I will share tonight, very helpful to you as you journey in your grad school. So again, I am Princess Zarla Jeragindin, and I am greeting everyone from the Far Eastern University here in Philippines, here in Manila, Philippines. So Far Eastern University is awarded the Center of Excellence for Teacher Education. And we also have a lot of graduate students with us. And we have the same endeavor, we have the same goal with which to really enhance the research skills of our students. So first and foremost, let's have a Zoom check-in. I am keen to know if some of our participants here already have a publication or you are preparing to submit a manuscript. Can you share to the group your experiences by typing them and by typing it in our Zoom chat box? So let's have maybe a minute for that. To our participants, so for everyone who's in this room, maybe Ms. Norina and Ms. Danya, you can also participate. I think we are also keen to know what are your experiences in, if you currently have your publication, if you already have your publication, or you are preparing your manuscript for submission. Can you share to us your journey in publishing your work or your journey in preparing your manuscript?
Okay, so maybe I can share some of my experience right now. I think I'm teaching, and most of my studies are design related. So I'm coming from visual communication design, and I think so far, when I was trying to publish my manuscript, what I found out is the first is it's quite difficult to categorize or which journal you put it, because in a research sometimes it's very cross-discipline. My background is design, but sometimes my research, it can be published in educational or perhaps in more like social studies. So it's the first thing you have to decide which journal is a challenge to me. Okay, and then after that, how we choose our journal, I think it's very, very the next step that you have to like strategize how to write it well, because a different discipline requires a slightly different writing style. I found it, and it's always like that. So when I was having like a slightly different manuscript, well, I will start again. Maybe that's my current experience with publication, Dr. Zarla. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry Makasi. Yes, I think you had 2 points that I'll be touching also in my presentation, because those are important aspects to consider in really ensuring that you are able to publish a paper. You really need to consider the journal, which journal you will submit, and then eventually modifying your paper according to the conventions of this journal. What about the rest of our participants here? of course, during our discussion, please feel free to share your insights if you have something to share. We can allow that. I can allow that, I think, to make our discussion engaging. If not, you can always type in our Zoom chat box. Are there any more sharing? If you don't have a publication yet, maybe you want to share what are your experiences. For Evandy, he says, I have one published on a proceeding last year and planning to submit another maybe this year on a national level journals. Congratulations on that, Evandy. Now, can you briefly share us your experience? How was it? What were the difficulties, I think, that you need to undergo? Because the thought that we really need to, for example, your school really need to put up a webinar session like this, and then you are taking up methodology subjects in your classes, you are doing your requirements, just like a very research-based, because researching and publishing are two difficult activities and two the same activities that will really entail you so much energy, time, effort, to the point that you get frustrated. And that's why we are talking about it now. I think it's part of your camp, because really we want to help you and support you how to have a encouraging experience also while attaining the goal. Are there any more sharers? So anyway, if you think you want to share your experience, and it will encourage it will encourage the group to publish, please feel free to type them in our Zoom chat box. As for me, yes, I have a publication, but later on, as I go with my presentation, I'll be sharing you a lot of my experiences, and these are not all happy experiences. I think a lot of you who already published will agree later on. So Ivandi said some obstacles that I get last year was how to describe all what I researched on just 10 to 12 pages. It's kind of challenging. Yes, that's one thing difficult with publishing a scientific article, because writing a research paper, like writing a thesis paper, dissertation, doing a research, is a different skill. And then putting them together, all your thoughts, ideas, findings, into a publishable article, you have a limit of words, and then but you need to consider all the salient points of the research paper. So that's another difficult thing. So thank you for sharing, Evandy. So I guess we'll continue. For those of you you still want to share later on, please feel free to type in our chat box. So now, again, as I was saying, we are talking about publishing, because it's really quite a feat to get published in a research journal, because what happens, it took you a long time to survey the literature just so that you can identify what are the literature gaps, so that you can frame your research questions. And then after you frame your research questions, how will you answer these questions? You started to gather data. That alone is a very tedious activity. And then after that, you still need to organize, analyze your raw data, and then put them into writing, so much so that you have a coherent and substantial discussion of the findings. All those are difficult activity. Now, when you start to submit your paper, your peer reviewers will really scrutinize your paper, will go thoroughly your paper, and it's like submitting your work, exposing yourself only to get rejected, only to get killed, only to to receive an email that says no, we cannot accept your paper. But for a lot of us, social scientists, especially graduate students, publishing is a very as part of the academic requirements now. Even in our university, in the Institute of Education, we have this PhD by and master's by research degree where we require our students to publish in reputable journal. And with this, we are able to measure, we are able to see if our students were able to acquire this broad scientific knowledge about their area. And then, of course, for us who are teaching, who are in the academe, publishing, our motivation to publish is more of a practical level. Sometimes we need to publish because we need this to retain our position, or even we can get this promotion, or for some universities, they have these incentives. And of course, for some, they want to get published because of the prestige of getting published. But in fact, we need to publish because of the fundamental assumption that we are social scientists. Therefore, we must not only do science. So doing science as social scientists, as scientists, does not only end when we get done with our experiment, but we need to write and we need to let people know of our discovery, of the result of our experiment. So that's why publishing is very important. And a lot of us would really want to get published, even if there are a lot of struggles, difficulties that we need to face, and not to mention all the frustrations. So let me walk you through with my presentation this evening. So we'll have a bit of definition on what is scientific publishing. We'll cover topics about preparing and submitting manuscript. And then we will also we highlight identifying the right journal, as mentioned a while ago, because you might have a very good paper, your result are spectacular, it is well written, but if you had it submitted in a wrong journal, you risk of having your paper rejected. And then, of course, finally getting published. So what is a scientific publication? The term scientific writing, it commonly denotes our way of reporting our experiment, our way of reporting our research, and our way of telling, of contributing to the body of knowledge, but we are following patterns, we are following format, and we are following standards. In its broader sense, scientific writing also includes how we communicate about science through different journal articles, or there are also review papers, empirical papers, or even reflexivity paper. And with scientific publication, there's sufficient information that we put into where we assess our observation, so that we provide sufficient information also, so that the academic community can repeat our experiment, and of course evaluate intellectual processes. So scientific paper first should be clear. Clarity is an important characteristics of a scientific paper. A successful scientific examination is, of course, the result of a clear mind from from where you started, from conceptualizing what is the research gap, how are you going to answer this research gap, and then what methodology you will employ. And if you have the data, this is raw data, you still need clarity to be able to really analyze this data and even communicate the result of your findings. So most scientific papers, those published in journals, they get accepted because from abstract down to conclusion, the paper is really clear. So it's important that when your goal is really to get published, make sure that your manuscript is clear. Next, the result is shared and the result is understood. So as I said a while ago, those scientific experiment that we have, may it be in hard science, soft science, may it be in social science, they must be shared because the essence of scientific experimentation is contributing to the body of knowledge, and we can only contribute to the body of knowledge when we start writing it, when we start telling everybody that, hey, this is the result of my paper. However, having it shared does not, having your paper shared does not end there. It's important that it should be understood because the paper will speak for itself. The data that you put in your paper will speak for itself. You will not be there as the author to make all the explanations that I need to help me understand your paper. So which means if a scientific paper is clear, the result is shared and understood, then it's important that when we start writing scientific paper, then we start thinking as an academic writer. We go away with the creative writing that we used to do in high school or even in undergraduate, because when writing, again, a scientific paper, it's clear, it's straight to the point. We go away with the metaphors, similes, idiomatic expressions that we use in a creative writing. And of course, the context should be considered. So when we clearly, when we communicate clearly the content of our paper, we were able to share the result. It's important for us to think also what are insights that my readers can get from this paper. So if my paper sorry, I'll just have a bit of a disclaimer. Also, I'll be talking much on the side of social science because that's my orientation is. So, for example, if I'll be talking about the context of inclusive education for children, for example, with exceptionality, will this narrative that I have in my paper, the same narrative that children in Latin America, for example, are experiencing? So what can be, how can it help people in other contexts, group in other contexts, and how will people or organization in other contexts understand my text easily? Right, so let's proceed with some insights on how to prepare your manuscript. So, of course, it's important that you really plan your manuscript, and because your manuscript has to be an original research. One, I think the top criteria in the list of standards or criteria that you have Number one is novelty, your research should be original, because what's the use of publishing it in a journal if it has been published already, it has been understood already, it has been read already. So it's important that your paper should be an original paper. Next, your results should be significant. So sometimes a paper gets rejected because the result is very broad, or sometimes the result is very narrow, so much so that it will not really have an implication in the international context. And of course, you should have meaningful arguments in your paper. One one thing that will help you get published also is how you put your arguments, how meaningful your arguments are, and how you substantiate your arguments. That's why I keep telling my students also that if you want to be a good researcher, if you really want to write something, you should be reading a lot, because you can't just have an arguments and support your arguments based on purely assumptions, and your paper will appear like from page 1 to page 10, everything that you have there are assumptions. So that should not be. You should have meaningful arguments, claims that are supported by the literature, by facts, by details, and by research papers that has been published already. And in shaping your scientific paper, imagine, I like how Olson made a metaphor, a comparison in shaping a scientific paper. So she said in his book that it's like inviting a friend in your laboratory. So you don't just tell your friends, oh, that's what I'm doing now. Just look at the box in there, observe how things inside the box are moving and why it's moving. So that's not how you shape your scientific paper. So it's like asking a friend who isn't familiar of what you are doing in your laboratory, and then you orient your friend first to you identify what is the problem that you are trying, what are the questions that you are trying to give an answer, and why do you think that your answers to these questions are important. And then you slowly start to mention the focus of your research, and then you summarize how you were able to gather all the data, and then discuss the significance of your finding. So later on, I will also get back to this shaping your scientific paper, but basically, this is like a inverted pyramid shape. It's like an hourglass. You start from the broader sense, and then you go specifically to the focus of your study. And now when you are sharing your findings and how it relates to the broader context of your study, then you get back to the broader concepts again. So when you shape your scientific paper, you follow the hourglass shape from the very broad concept to the very focused or narrow ones, and then arguing it again to these broader concepts. And of course, even your even your referees will also look at what are ethics that you considered in working on your paper. So again, originality is important. And when we say originality, it doesn't mean that I will not quote studies, I will not quote literature, I will not quote what the earlier researchers have found out. When I say originality, it says that I am still answering a new question, but a lot of insights that I have that guides me up to the arguments that I have, up to the methodology that I'm using, is informed by the published papers already. Now, there are instances when you can also republish your paper that has been published way back. So what happens is you can do that if you have new findings and you want to argue your paper. You want to argue the earlier publication that you made. And then, of course, credit is there. It's important also that we give credit to whom it's due. So again, for novice researcher, um, they think it's not good to put on a lot of citations, to put on a lot of literature in their paper. But for me, whenever I review a paper, after checking the research question, the methodology, so which means along the way, whenever I review a paper, I also check on how much of the literature has been cited, because it will tell me that, wait, this author really knows what he or she is talking, because he or she really surveyed the literature. So it's okay to cite your references, give credit to whom it is due. And of course, also with originality and credit with originality, it also comes with the issue of submitting work to different journals. So there are novice researchers who submit paper to journal A, at the same time submit paper to journal B. So it's highly recommended that we submit paper to one journal and wait for their submission, and proceed with submitting to another journal if in case our paper got rejected, right? And then there are also researchers like those who just finished their dissertation, and with dissertation with a wealth of data. So there's a tendency to slice data and then publish them in several papers. So in scientific publication, they call that the cucumber science or salami science, because what you do is you slice your data, you split them into smaller ones, and have it published in different journal. For some, they discourage that because they think that a meaningful study, for example, if this study is from your dissertation, it only becomes meaningful if you tell a story of all the data that you were able to gather in this dissertation. But for some, it will work also if you think that the data that you have can be a standalone data and still a meaningful data, even it has been sliced from a bigger study. So that's about originality and also credit. I think I forgot to mention about plagiarism. So even I think a lot of novice researchers are afraid of citing a lot of literature because they think of issues of plagiarism. But the similarity index of your paper only escalates if you really copy the whole text from the original, or even if you did not copy the whole text, but what you did is you expressed the idea on how the author also expressed the idea, and you even picked the keywords that he or she used in his arguments. So if you do that in your paper, you also risk escalating the similarity index of your paper. So rephrasing a paper does not end with revising some words and everything. Rephrasing a literature, rephrasing a paragraph, for example, rephrasing a sentence is you express others' idea based on your understanding and based on how you should be expressing it and not copying from the author. So next is conflict of interest, of course, outside involvement that could at least interfere with the objectivity of the research being reported. Maybe, for example, my company would ask me to do a research, and the result of this research should be something that is favorable to them, and I had it published. So that's conflict of interest, and of course other ethical considerations, especially when our research participants, we include animals or human beings as participants. There are other ethical considerations that we need to ensure. And these four criteria are the same criteria that your reviewers will also look into when you submit a manuscript. Right? And then also, when we prepare our manuscript, just like what we heard a while ago, it's important that we consult instructions to author when you submit your paper. And where can you find this? Normally in a scientific journal, they have this tab. They have this section in their website, or they have this section anywhere in the submission tab. So these are instructions that you need to follow, because if you don't follow them, automatically the editor will reject your paper. So you risk getting a desk rejection. First is a scope. So it's important that you identify which journal you want to submit, and then you start writing your manuscript. Or if you already have your manuscript and you want to submit it, identify the journal and really understand what are their requirements, what are their instructions, and revise your paper according to their instructions. And you check on their scope. Is your paper within the scope? And it's important that you also understand the readership of your paper, who will be the audience, and then requirements just like number of words or referencing conventions. A lot of journal are very specific with minimum number of words, and then how you write your abstract, and then of course, even with the format to follow, some they follow the IMRAD format, but for reflexivity paper, they have this different format also. Last night I was browsing paper in Taylor and Francis, paper about urban planning and architecture, and I found out that they have different format also. And I also experienced submitting a paper in Taylor and Francis when they asked me to create a link for data storage. So when you submit the paper, make sure that your raw data, these are raw data, your raw data is at hand also, because the journal might be asking you to create a link, and then you upload all the data that you have. If you did a survey, then you should upload the encoded raw data in Excel file. If you did an interview, then your your transcriptions and consent should be uploaded. If you did study, like for example, a blueprint, then you need to upload a exhibit that really these are raw data that I have in my study, which helped me to come up with this findings of my paper. So consulting the instructions to author section of the journal is important. So that leads us to the second point, choosing the right journal too often we write scientific paper and then we consider where to publish them. So and for me that happens all the time also. I start writing my paper without even thinking which journal I should be submitting it, because my problem is I get very limited. I will be limited with the instructions that I have with the specific journal. So what I do is proceed with my research and proceed with writing, and then later on, I modify my paper in lieu of the requirements of the journal. And it's important that we choose the right journal also, again, to avoid rejection and even several rounds of revision. So choosing a journal carefully helps us to reach the most suitable audience. We gain appropriate recognition and, of course, avoid difficulties with publication. Reach the most suitable audience and gain appropriate recognition, which means some authors will also start to cite your paper, because what happens, our paper got published, but we published it in the wrong journal. So instead of, for example, my paper is about inclusive education, and then I submitted it in maybe multidisciplinary journal or other journal, and they accepted my paper, but this journal is about urban planning. So what happened, there is almost minimum to zero visibility of my paper because I submitted it in the wrong journal. It got buried in there, so the recognition is not there. And also I feel like I was not able to really communicate my results to the intended audience. And also difficulties with publication. So the decision where to submit your manuscript is important because of poor choices. Some papers are delayed in revision, some are not being reviewed, or they are buried in inappropriate journal. So if you submit your paper in a poor journal, three things can happen. So it's not appropriate, it may receive a poor review, and it may never hurt, just like what I said a while ago. So when you choose the right journal, make sure also that it's within the scope, it's within in line with the research, with the questions that you are arguing in your paper. And then you also might want to check the citation reports of that journal. And citation reports will help us determine that really this paper is the same article that a lot of researchers recognize and put in their paper also. So a paper published in a garbage journal, of course, will not get a lot of citation also. And then you might want to think of publishing your paper in an open access journal. So that can also work, and that is also good because of the visibility of your paper. And when we consider journals where we can publish our paper, it's also important that we spot and avoid predatory journals. I know a lot of us have heard already the danger of publishing in predatory journals. And these journals are actually dishonest journals. They just take advantage of the researchers' money, but they were never reviewed. They were never, the quality were never taken care of. So submitting to predatory journal does not advance science, and second, does not advance your professional growth as a researcher. So please be careful with where you publish your paper. First, avoid predatory journals. And second, try to publish paper in high impact paper or reputable paper, just like the ones that are indexed in Scopus or SSCI, because in the academic community, publishing 10 articles in maybe not a really good journal as compared to publishing one or two paper in high reputable paper. A lot of researchers will go with the one who published two paper with good quality. So which means in publishing, while we encourage everyone to really publish, to really contribute to the body of knowledge, we put much weight on the quality also. All right, so this is a website of ZEC Technical University, and this is the link. Maybe I will send it later in our Zoom chat box after I get done with the talk, so you can check it. So it gives an overview on predatory publishing, and even a link on Bell's list. This librarian Jeffrey Bell, who compiled all these journals which are potentially predatory. So again, avoid publishing your paper in predatory journals and aim publishing your paper in high impact journal, because whether you publish one or two, that is better than having 20 paper published in a low quality journal or 50 paper published in a predatory journal. So next is submitting your work. So before you submit your manuscript, you need to review again the instruction to the authors as stipulated in the journal of your choice. So if the journal provides a manuscript subscription checklist, please use that checklist and make sure on the dot you follow all the instruction, because if you deviate from their conventions, the author will immediately reject your paper and will not send them for peer review. So of course, in your manuscript, it's important that you have a good a detailed introduction, and then you summarize the end of your introduction, and then you have detailed in the results mentioned in the discussion also, and you have details in the discussion. And common sections of a journal article: the title, the abstract, introduction, methods and materials, findings, discussion, conclusions, limitations, and significance. Of course, for a lot of reflexivity paper will not necessarily follow this format, but there should still be a good explanation on how scientifically you wrote your paper. For abstract, it's very important because it's your key to publication success, and it holds all the information that we need from your paper. And because abstract is freely available online, so it means if you publish in a paid subscription, so at least we are able to read your abstract. And abstract should be relevant. It should be it's relevant, it's your key to publication because it's your whole paper in a miniature, and it's easy to retrieve. It's easy to retrieve, and also it talks about the availability of your paper. And also title is important. You need to think of a simple and precise title, catchy title, catchy so much so that it's easy to understand and it's not misleading, and should contain descriptive words like what do you hope to answer at some for some paper. They also include in the title the methodology that they use, and probably a hint on their research question, and we don't use abbreviations. This is not in APA 7 anymore for social science, but I'm not sure if this is still required by some of the journals where you need to submit a running head. And of course, even with the list of authors. So this is also one important aspect that you need to think of when you collaborate with fellow researchers. Who will be the main author, who will be the corresponding author, and who will be the second author. Of course, in determining the placement of author, it will depend on how much work has been done. For example, in this paper that I co-published this actually with my advisor in my PhD, but because this is within my conceptualization and a lot of work has been done by me, and my supervisor was there with checking and refining the paper. So she allowed me to be the first author and corresponding author, and she being the second author, and setting aside me being the student and she being my advisor. So again, abstract is very important. It should be precise and full of information because it's the miniature of your paper. A lot of journal would ask you to submit like 250 or 300 words. Please try to follow that convention also when writing your journal. So when writing your abstract, I mean, so it's a condensed version of your whole paper. So it should be precise, clear. It should stand alone, which means I will be able to understand your paper, the whole manuscript, even if sorry, I'll only go through with your abstract. And because it's the miniature version of your paper, and maybe provides 1 to 2 sentences as a summary of each section in your paper. So this is an abstract that in one of the publications that I have. So the rationale is there, the objectives and methods is there, the findings is there, and implications and conclusions. So these four are the important sections of your manuscript. But see, I was able to put them in a very condensed version, so much so that I was able to recreate a miniature of my whole manuscript. So it should be written in past tense, should not include tables and figures, and it's one paragraph. And of course, economy of words, there is more in less, and mention novelty of your paper. So for some, they would require an unstructured abstract, but for some, they require structured abstract. You need to check that also when you submit a paper. So this is a 200, maybe this is a 150 abstract. You need to do that also if a journal requires you to submit a 150 words abstract. So a well-prepared abstract enables reader to identify the basic content, arguments of the paper, relevance, and decide whether me as a researcher need your paper as a document in my study, or will I be needing the abstract alone, or will I be needing the whole manuscript? Next is your introduction. Your introduction of your paper identifies problem gap, justify why you conducted the study, describe the context, and then how your study will fill the knowledge gap and solve the conflict. So this is what I was saying a while ago, the inverted pyramid model in writing the introduction part of your paper. You start with the broader context, until you start to ask what aspect of the condition or phenomenon are you focusing, what is it that you want to ask, and then how will you answer your research gap, and then what will be the implication to your study. So when you write your introduction, please avoid the lengthy introduction. Put all the words that you need when you write your discussion and result of your paper. You present first the nature and scope of your paper, and you review only pertinent literature, but it's important that you make your reviewers understand that you really surveyed the literature. And then it should make clear the objectives of your paper, and please do not confuse introduction with discussion. So all the raw data that you have, put them in discussion. You should not be putting any data that you have in your study in your introduction. You are just providing us with the context of your study, and be judicious in using subheadings. Do not describe your findings yet, and of course, conclude your introduction. So what are the questions that you can ask in writing your introduction? Is it written in a way that it's understandable to a non-specialist reader? So for example, if I am writing about inclusive education, will the paper that I wrote be understood by students or researchers in urban planning or architectural and design? And if I am writing a paper about architectural design, is this something that can be beneficial to teachers in designing their, for example, their playground or their school environment? And does the organization of your thoughts conform to the inverted pyramid? And does it provide all the information that I need to understand your paper? And then the important facts and assertions are supported. Sorry. And of course, were you able to describe the findings of previous studies? Because a bad introduction means a bad ending of your paper. So make sure that you have a good introduction. Next is the methods section. This is important part of your paper because this is where you tell your reader and your reviewer that these were the questions that I tried to answer, and I think I was able to get a reliable and valid answer because this is the methodology, these are the activities that I employed to answer the questions that I want to answer. So you should be informing your readers of the design, and when you do describe your sampling, you don't just describe what's the technique, but you need to inform us of your inclusion criteria. Why did you, who are these public school teachers that you are talking about? Who are these urban planners that you interviewed? Or what setting have you studied for your paper? And then validity and reliability of the tool, of the instruments and materials that you use, and then again, practice of ethical considerations, and then how was the data analyzed, or you can also tell what software you use to analyze your data. So it's important that your methodology is precise and meticulous, because if your methodology is found weak and insufficient, then it will risk you risk rejecting your paper. I review some articles in Scopus Index journals. Whenever I'm done identifying the research question, I proceed with methodology. And if I found that the methodology is inappropriate with the research questions, then I immediately reject the paper. Or if I have a lot of questions, doubts about the methodology section, I reject the paper. And then avoid shifting, put subheadings, use references, do not replicate the same methodology that has been used. Take note of form and grammar, mention your rationale of using the methodology, and it should be in a chronological order. Yeah. So this is a sample of the methodology that I use in my paper. Let me do this quickly because I think we're running out of time already. So this is organized and in chronological order because what I did here is we developed a tool. So we, in the process section, we started from stage 1 up until stage 5. Next is the result. When you publish your result, it's important that you are able to tell the story very well because the result may not be interpreted accurately, or you may not interpret it accurately, but of course you can have it reported perfectly. And because whatever, sorry, whatever you put on your paper, your results will speak for itself. Sorry for that. Let me just get a good drink. So when you write the results section of your paper, again, you need to introduce your section, and then there should be text part of your result. When you're doing a quantitative study, you don't put the tables immediately, but you introduce again to your reader what is it that you try to answer. And then, of course, tables. Your figures, charts, and graphs, they should be neatly designed. And then photographs, if you need to. I've scanned some papers on urban planning. I've seen that they attach a lot of photographs also. So this is how organized your table should be, and make sure that you follow the style of writing. So for example, this is APA style. So you need to follow that because your editor will also check that. And then for discussion and conclusion, of course, you don't want to include everything in your conclusion because you already stated them in your introduction and also in your discussion. So if you put everything in your conclusion, it might appear that you lack discrimination of what to put in here, to put in there. So when you write your discussion part of your paper and your conclusion, there should be a coherence, but you don't replicate everything. So when you write your discussion, you still follow the pyramid model. What are your main findings? You corroborate it with with the literature, and then you identify and answer the question. And then do not exaggerate your findings. You let your paper stand over the sorry for that. You let your paper stand out over the rest with how you tell a story of your findings. And then do not report new data in your discussions if you did not mention them in the results section. And then resist the urge to repeat what you have written in your introduction section. So while you corroborate with the literature, make sure that you do not repeat it. So again, for conclusion, this is your final paragraph. It should be well thought, and this is a take-home message for your reader. And when you write your introduction, avoid mentioning unrelated concepts and unrelated ideas. with regards to your results. And then there should be no speculation. So which means it can be a reiteration of it can be a reiteration of your introduction, but you are now giving us the take-home message, and you limit citing authors, and you don't include long discussions. So this is an example of a conclusion of my paper. I mentioned a while ago that we limit using references, but I can't stop but use references here because I need to support the powerful claims that I have in the conclusion. And of course, you can use reference manager. A lot of journal will also check if you use reference manager because it tells them that all the references that you use in your paper are there. And of course, celebrate acceptance. You deal with rejections and learn from your revisions. This is our fourth point. So your paper can be accepted, can be modified when there are minor or major corrections, or it can get rejected. And I haven't heard of researchers who got their paper accepted as is. So most of the time when a paper gets accepted, there is a revision that the author has to make. And when our paper gets rejected, also it can be rejected in the level of the editor because of the reasons that I mentioned a while ago. When your paper is not submitted sorry for that, I have a bit of a cough. When your paper is submitted to the wrong journal, or when your paper is the data is useful but is flawed, when you were not careful with the methodology, or the editor really don't want to see your paper, and your findings is not important enough, or it's broad enough. So of course, eventually when you get your paper published, you also need to celebrate when you eventually publish. And I think one important thing that I want to share with you all is don't be afraid of the risk of being rejected. As for me, I had papers that has been rejected also, but with the comments of the referee and editors, these are the same comments that I use to improve my paper, to improve my manuscript, and had it submitted to another journal until such time that I was able to enhance my research writing skills and eventually got several acceptance of my paper. So later on, while we have our moderator speaking, I want us also to do a Zoom checkout by sharing what are our major takeaway for this evening's session, from publishing your paper to revising and preparing your manuscript. So these are my references. Terima kasih. Good evening, everyone. And sorry for I have a bit of a cough tonight.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zarla, for sharing your very insightful presentation with us. And I think we are going to the next session. It's going to be the question and answer session. This is a very, very practical presentation that maybe all of you, the audience here, who will be maybe the beginner or you already publishing papers before, you can ask question to Dr. Zarla. We have one question for you, Dr. Zarla. It's from Mr. Heru. He like to ask, for the every type of paper level, Q1, Q2, Q3, can you tell us the difference and the requirement of it and what you suggest to us for the first publishing? Yes, Q paper is not easy for many people. Okay, may I
Yes, publishing in quartile 1, 2, 3, and 4 journals is really not easy. And maybe for novice researchers, of course, we encourage you to really publish on a reputable journal, much as possible on Q1 journals. But if you think you find it really challenging, maybe you can go away with Q1 to Q4 journals and try to submit your paper with other journals that are indexed in Scopus and indexed in SSCI, because there are still high impact and reputable journals that are not really within Q1 to Q4 journals. And yes, it's really difficult to publish in these journals, although I have 3 paper that has been published in Q3 journals, but really the preparation, even the revision that I have to make just so that my paper will get published in this Q3 journal is really at times tiring, exhausting, and but at the end of the day, just like what I mentioned a while ago, when you contribute, when you publish your paper, you are contributing to science. And if you publish in journal that is not careful with reviewing also, then you don't advance science also. So we still encourage you to really publish in high impact journal if you think it's still difficult to publish in Q1 to Q4 journal. So where do we usually get the list of Q1 to Q4 journal? Simago has a tag of Q1 to Q4 journals, which means if these are Q1 within quartile 1 journal, so these are 25 best, 25%, 25% upper 25% journals. So you might consult Simago for that if you want to check which are journals that's within Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And of course, if the journal is within Q1, that's why it's in Q1, because really it's a high quality journal. Then they have higher standards in terms of methodology and especially the novelty of your paper. But also, I don't want you to be afraid of publishing in Q1 to Q4 journal. You know, the first time I tried to submit my manuscript, I submitted it in a Q1 journal. And then, of course, it got rejected because I was in the first initial year of my PhD then. But what I did is all the comments that the referees had in my paper, I used that to enhance my paper skill and also to learn from publishing and enhancing my paper. And I was able to submit it in a high reputable paper still. So Q1 is top 25%, Q2 50%, Q3 75%, and Q4 is this is 100%, top 100%. So that's Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. So I think Q1 is if you never published a journal before, it's in the index journal, it's going to be very, very difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
And maybe reviewing will take you a lot of time. I have submitted a paper in a Q1 journal last March, and until now, it's still with the reviewers. I haven't got any feedback from the editor yet, so that's already 6-7 months.
Yeah, so long. And how long is it? You say that you publish Q3 and all the process.
For Q3, because you also want to check on how frequent the journal will publish. So this journal, they publish quarterly. So the review is relatively quick, but I think their reviewers are also good, really experts in their field. So that's why even their feedback are important, are really insightful and very much detailed. So I think really it should be in a Q3 journal with the way how they facilitate everything.
Okay, okay, thank you, Dr. Zarla. And maybe for maybe the last question, the question is quite interesting. This is also for if you are a beginner research, how you will find novelty, because finding a novelty that's approved or by journals is something it's not easy for us to find. So how to develop our research to find novelty that we are not, that we will know it's different. For example, if we are using a same method as the previous research. So maybe the point is the novelty as you present before.
Sorry, novelty is you can check them. That's why I mentioned a while ago, it's important that you really immersed with the literature. You immersed with the current literature, with the trends and issues in your field, because that is where you start to ask what is missing. So that's why I mentioned a while ago that it's very important that when you start to do research, you also commit yourself to do a lot of readings. Also, because that's where you able to know what is the research gap that you can probably provide solution with. But when we say research gap, it doesn't always mean that this should be new concept or new question. There are different research gap that we can invoke. We can also invoke a methodological gap. For example, there is a study that has been done, for example, in the field of social science, and the researcher used quantitative methods in answering the research question. Then you might want to argue the findings of that research, then you might want to invoke methodological gap, then you want to use qualitative design and argue your result also. So that can also work. That is still novelty. So what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, if you really want your paper to have a novelty, you should be immersed with the literature, because then and only then that you are able to know what is missing, what is not yet published, and what has to be answered. And of course, it's not just reading, but also arguing with every readings that you do, and you read from one research paper to another research paper and look for arguments and counter arguments, and from there you can frame your research question, you can frame the novelty of your paper.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zarla. So I think what we have to do if we want to have a novelty is immersing yourself in literature first. Then you can get the point to argue. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zarla, for sharing your presentation with us today. It's a pleasure for me to moderate your session, and I hope we'll see you again someday.
I hope also.
Okay, very nice to meet you here. Okay, so I think the session for me as a moderator is also end, and I will pass the time to our MC, the committee, Ms. Dania. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much to Dr. Zala for the excellent lecture today, and thank you for Ms. Norina for conducting this presentation. Furthermore, we would like to present a certificate awarding to Dr. Zala as our speaker and also Ms. Norina as our moderator today. This is the certificate to Dr. Zala as our speaker today. Thank you, Dr. Zala. The next is for Narina as our moderator. Thank you so much, Ms. Narina. And once again, thank you very much to our speaker and moderator for your availability on today's session. Before we wrap up the session, we would like to invite all participants as well as our honorable speaker and moderator to have a group photo. For participants, please turn on your camera.
I also bring greetings to participants here from the Philippines. I see some of them.
Thank you so much for For all the participants, please turn on your camera as we will have a photo session with Dr. Zala and Norina. Okay, so I will start the photo session. 3, 2, 1. Once again, 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone. Now that we have finished the photo, for the participants, please fill the feedback form through the link that you can see on the Zoom chat room. I want to remind you, the participant who will get the certificate is the participant to come on time, join this event until the end, and fill the feedback form. Before we part, I would like to inform you that we still have several future agendas in R2SEP for Architecture, Urban Planning, Design, and Social Sciences stream. You can see it on the poster we are showing you right now, or you can check it out on ICS Global Engagement website later. We will see you in the next session on Thursday, 9 December 2021. And finally, we have reached the end of today's researcher and research student engagement program, and we sincerely apologize for any mistakes you may have made presenting as master ceremony and committee. Thank you very much to our speaker, moderator, and all participants and cooperation. Once again, thank you everyone for today, and good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Zarla and Ms. Norina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zarla.
Thank you, Norina. Thank you, Nabila. Thank you, Dania.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Allow me to end the session in 3,